be spiritually mature and emotionally immature. The two don't go together. We can know spiritual stuff and we can understand spiritual things, but to truly be spiritually mature, part of that means we have to understand where we are in our emotional health and our emotional maturity. Also, mental, which it all ties together, but mental health and mental maturity is important. I'm physically healthy, I'm mentally healthy, I'm emotionally healthy. Actually, we never talk about emotionally healthy, so we'll throw that one aside. And I'm spiritually healthy. The problem is you can't be just one without the other because it's all a complete thing, which is why when Jesus was tested by that lawyer, that great teacher, what is the most important commandment? His answer was, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. In other words, love God with all of you. Continue to grow in all of you. That is all I desire. Because the second commandment is like it, it will help you to love your neighbor as yourself. And that is equally as important according to Jesus. So if we're going to do that, then we need to address it. But as I've shared, the church is notorious historically for just almost putting a Band-Aid on issues by saying, learn another verse, which is important, go to church again, which is important, read your Bible, which is important, pray again, which is important, and then feel good about it. But we don't want to dig into the hard work of talking about our mental health and our emotional health and all of that stuff that would actually continue to develop us into becoming whole disciples of Jesus, those who love him with everything so that we can love others. Most of the reason we struggle to love others is because of our own emotional and mental health issues, not because of theirs. But if we don't address it and understand that, we struggle with that. That's why we're addressing it, which just real quickly, we discovered that most of the things that we do and deal with come from see. It comes from what is below the surface, like an iceberg. The 85 to 90% of us that's below the surface that nobody sees is what causes the 10% that we do see. And a lot of that stuff, then the iceberg comes from somewhere else. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. It comes from things from our past. It comes from experiences. It comes from our family of origin. It comes from all that kind of stuff, leading us into responding and acting and feeling the way that we feel today. So it's important that we go back and we address that and we be honest. Unless, by the way, all of this is only if we actually care to grow in it. Because if we don't, we can just go, okay, whatever, and then just keep doing what we've been doing. But I would guess that the majority of us in this room, when it's just us and it's just us and God, tend to go, I wish I could quit doing that. I don't know why I responded that way again. I don't know why I snapped at the kid when I didn't really need to. I'm going to guess most of us wishes there's some things that we're doing that we weren't doing or that we're not doing that we would be doing. In order to do that, this is the stuff we need to dig into. Because just learning another verse isn't just going to change it. We've been learning that for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and we're still doing it. Maybe we need to go to the root and go beneath the surface. Last week, we kind of shifted gears on that and said the way that we're going to be able to be willing to address this is by understanding something about ourselves. Can anybody tell me what that was? A truth about ourselves that we don't want to necessarily tend to believe is true. Can anybody tell me what that might be? That we are what? It's a W word. We thought hard about it this week, didn't we? We are weak and vulnerable people, and that's okay. God works through that. I shared with you my moment of the basketball game when the boys ended their season against Ellis, and my response, and I have found out that my fears were true. People did see how I responded. There was one family that wasn't here last week that I said I need to apologize to, and I told them, I said, did you happen to watch the service? Because I apologized to you guys. Said, for what? And I kind of brought up, and she goes, oh, yeah, I told my husband, did you see that? Leanne had to grab Jared and pull him back. If you remember, I had a moment where, like my past, where something that was in me before jumped up, and I literally got up and was so in the midst of from cheering to being upset almost fell on Daryl and Carolyn. Maybe that's why he remembers what's going on, but I almost fell on them in the game because I got so into it and had to literally grab me and pull me back. I looked like a drunk dad in that moment, not able to keep his balance. It was that bad. And when Leanne sat me down, thank goodness the mask was on, or could have been worse, but the look was still there from the eyes, and it was, knock it off. Was all she said. I defended myself for a moment, but through the night went, why did I do that? I haven't done that in so long. Yes, I get upset. I yell things. I get into games, but that was something different. Because I'm still weak and vulnerable. It still happens. I'm still cracked. I'm still broken. Even as I'm growing, that's a part of who I am. That doesn't make it an excuse. It's something I need to realize so that I don't get defensive and I don't think more highly of myself. And I'm willing to do the work of looking at my emotional, my mental, even physical health. This week, I had another realization, and it's the second part of the weak and vulnerable that goes along with it. It came through something that I've been saying that I'm done doing. When we first moved back here, I didn't have a job. We came back here for Leanne to work at the college. That's why we came back to this area, kind of her dream to work at her alma mater. I did feel my time where I was had come to an end. It was time to move on. It was time for them. I'd gone as far as that church was going to go with me. It was time for somebody else to go wherever they were going to go next. I really did feel that. I was comfortable with it, but I didn't have a job. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't come back here to be here. In fact, the fact I'm standing in front of you now, still, when people will say, when did you start here? My answer is, I actually don't know when this happened because of just the way that it all happened. I'm thankful for it, but I don't know. But when I came here, I didn't have that. So I had to figure out how to get income and what to do. And one thing that I just naturally found when I was in Newburgh, actually, and we got our first house, was that I could paint. And I do a pretty good job painting. So just started helping a few people, and just my uncle actually got me a paint job, an outdoor paint job, which led somebody else to see that I was doing that, which led them to ask if I would do theirs. And all of a sudden, had this little unofficial business taking place and was able to get income through painting. And the truth is, many times I liked it. It was nice to just be able to put in some earphones and just kind of put out the world for a little bit and just listen to what's going on. But as it turned into more of a job and there was more pressure on time and everything else, that part wasn't quite as fun because now you're in other people's expectations. But I was still able to do it. Then things started taking place. There was more involved here all the time, and still able to do both of them. But it came to a point where we've gotten to a point where it was like, when I go to do a paint job now, I'm just kind of stressed because there's too many other things that need to get done. This is the priority, not that. This is what needs to take place. So I enjoy that, but overall, it's hard. I've kind of said I'm done. Unless it's a day job or two at the most, I just have to say I can't do it. But I got asked right before Christmas time, whatever it was, somewhere in that time, maybe even before Thanksgiving, I had somebody come by and said, there's a couple from Colorado that's moved into town, and I gave them your name. Would you have any interest in painting for them? I said, honestly, not really, but because I can never just say no. And they said, can I give them your name if they call you? I say, sure, they can call me. I never heard anything. And then after Christmas, get into the new year, I don't know, into January, somewhere in there, I get a text again, and it said, told me their name, and said, so-and-so gave me your name. We're wondering if you'd be interested in doing some painting for us. I said, I'm not sure about that, but I went ahead and gave him a call, and I talked to him, and what is it, Jerry Maguire? Is that the one where they said you had me at hello? Is that the movie? This guy is so nice, and his personality, even on the phone, that dude had me at hello on there. Like, just the way he says hi, you're like, there is no way I can tell this guy no. But he said, we're looking for a painter. We can't find someone to paint. All this kind of stuff. We were given your name. Would you be interested? Honestly, I'm not really doing that. I just can't. And I gave all the excuses I could. I said, what do you have left to paint? It's not much. It's just a bedroom in a living room, in a hallway, in a wall in the dining room. And he goes, would you at least be willing to come look at it? Again, oh, no, but I went and looked at it. And then you walk in, and they are so stinking nice. And he walks me through, and these aren't little bedrooms. It's a big house. These are big rooms. And I'm just thinking, oh boy. And then I look at it, and if you've ever painted, when you cut in, cutting everything in, and I looked at it and I thought, okay, this doesn't look terrible, other than the fact they've got crown molding around the ceiling, and then a foot below, they've got another layer of crown molding under that. Guess what that means? More time. And he goes, do you think you could do it? I was like, no, I can't do it, but you have me. You are way too nice. I said, are you okay if this takes a while? Because I can tell you that this is not my top priority. I work at the church. Here's what goes on. It might take a while. And he goes, oh, it's okay. It might take a while. He goes, it's okay if it takes a while. And I said, and this is my final test. I was like, I mean like May before I'm done. And I thought for sure at that moment I got out of it. And he said, whatever it takes. How do you say no to that? I mean, seriously. He goes, we'll pull all the furniture away. We'll have this all here. You just tell us when you're ready to come. We'll even put the dogs out for you. Everything within me wanted to go, no, no, no. This is a bad idea. But I couldn't say no. Can I tell you, this last week has been the most anxious, stressful, I'm irritated, frustrated week that I've had in a long time, because I started painting over there, and it's a good situation. They are a very nice couple. It's when you're over there, they're a joy to talk to. And things got done, but the whole time it just felt like stretched. And I was reminded at how much we are tempted and how often we do something that ends up hurting us and our health, even emotionally, because we are broken and weak people. And that is how often we go beyond the limits of what God actually has for us in life. And that's what I want to spend a few minutes talking about this morning, is the reminder that as people who are going to accept their brokenness and their vulnerability and understand that it's a gift from God, we need to become increasingly aware of another part of who we are as human beings, and that is our limits. We need to come and be okay with the realization in life of a concept that is hard for us to understand, and that is that each of us is profoundly limited in who we can be and what we can do. And these limits are actually a gift from God. In fact, I think we have that for the screen. I want you to see these words because I think they're very true. Each of us is profoundly limited in who we can be and what we can do. And these limits are actually a gift from God. And the reason I say that so directly is because everything around us tells us, often for selfish reasons, sometimes for inspiring, we're often told by people, no, you can do more than you imagine, which there's some truth to that. Or you can do anything you put your mind to, which that is not true, actually. But we're told constantly, you can do more, you can do more, you can do more, you can do more. And sometimes God's going, no, I created you for who you are. And yes, there's limits to that, and that's okay. It's a gift. And the reason it's a gift, Pete Scazzero says in his book, is because emotionally healthy people understand the limits God has given them. They joyfully receive the 1, the 2, the 7, or the 10 talents God has so graciously distributed. And as a result of this, they're not frenzied, and they're not covetous, and they're not trying to live a life God never intended. Instead, when we begin to understand our limits and that they're a gift from God, our lives are marked by contentment and joy. The gift of limits that God has placed on us is just that, a gift. They're like a fenced-in backyard to keep the children from getting out to places that they shouldn't be. That's what the gift of limits is in our lives. They're the things that keep us grounded so that we don't step out and hurt others or hurt ourselves in situations that we shouldn't be in. They're the guardrails on the side of the road that can keep us on our journey towards the hopes and expectations and plans that God has for us. Our limits are part of that. In fact, when I think of that, I always picture in my mind, if you haven't been there, it's hard for you to do it, but there's a beautiful part of on the interstate going into Portland, Oregon. Not quite as beautiful at the moment as it used to be, but it's a beautiful picture. In fact, I used to want to stop on this bridge and just take a picture because of what it shows in downtown Portland. I loved when we would go somewhere at night and go over that bridge and look over. I have a picture hanging up, actually, of what it looks like. But one thing it does do in Oregon a lot is what we just experienced the last 2 days, and that's rain, and can rain hard at times. And that same thing that is so beautiful that you want to see and that you want to get to in nice weather, when it's not so nice, that's not an enjoyable trip to take, trying to go over that bridge during that time when you can't hardly see and the road's slick and everything else is going on. What I am so thankful for at that moment are those guardrails that if I get a little too far here or a little too far here or I start to slide, might help protect me from going over the edge into the Willamette River down below. I picture that, and that's what the gift of limits is for our lives. That if we're going to continue to grow in our emotional health, we need to be okay with accepting. And if we struggle with the idea of accepting this, please know that Jesus did as well. In fact, let's look at a moment. Open to Matthew 4, if you would, with me. Open to Matthew 4. I want to look at a moment that I know you've probably heard of or read before. It seems like it comes up a lot, where Jesus demonstrated that he understood that there were limits in his life as well. This is to start off his ministry. This is after everybody heard those, "This is my son with whom I'm well pleased, whom I love." This is all this. He's getting ready to kick things off. He's getting ready to get going. And he gets led out into the wilderness, it says in Matthew chapter 4, verse 1, by the Spirit to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. At that moment, the tempter came to him and he said, "If you are the Son of God," which we've talked about that in our Wednesday night thing a couple times, but right off the bat, he started questioning who he was, or getting him to start wondering, is this really who I am? But by challenging his identity, if you really are the Son of God, he starts to tempt him and says, "Tell these stones to become bread." I don't know if it's as cut and dry as we read it here. I don't even know, honestly, if it was literally a physical showdown between Satan and Jesus, or if it was Satan messing with his head like he does ours all the time. I don't know. I don't really care. But it makes me wonder if Jesus for a moment went, "Okay, I know I can," but then realized, no. That's not what I'm called to do right now. And so answered, "It's written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." And in that moment, when he had a chance to go over the limits of what God had for him, decided, no, we're just going to let the rocks remain rocks. So Satan, the devil, took him to a holy city, and he had him stand on the highest point of the temple, and he said, "If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down." In other words, if you really belong to God, if you're his son, if you're him, just throw yourself off, because it's written, he's going to command his angels concerning you, and they're going to lift you up in their hands, and you're not going to strike your foot against a stone. I wonder if there was a moment where Jesus went, I am called to this big ministry. This is a chance to get on TV, because nobody's done this. This is a chance to really make a name for myself. I mean, I could do this. I could, right now I'm a nobody, but my name could get out there. I wonder if maybe for a moment that went through his head. I don't know. But the temptation was there to exceed those limits, because he could have. But instead he says, you know what? It's also written, do not put your Lord your God to the test. And he just accepted the fact that it wasn't his time to show what he was capable of doing. So finally, the devil took him to a very high mountain, and he showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their splendor. And he looked at Jesus and he said, "All this I'm going to give to you if you'll just bow down and worship me." Again, I wonder what might have went through Jesus' mind as he just maybe reasoned that if he gathered all this power and all this influence, you know how much quicker he could do the Father's work faster? I mean, and you know what? Yes, I know I bow to Satan, but I can repent and apologize for that later. I just wonder if any of that ever went through his head to cross that limit and go, man, if I had all the influence and power over these kingdoms, what I could do, if he were to exceed those limits at that moment. But instead he said no. And in fact, in this one, he seemed to get irritated and said, that's enough. Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And in that moment, Jesus accepted the gift of limits of this wasn't the time, this wasn't the way, and he just walked down the simple temple steps. Jesus, right off to start his ministry, demonstrated a gift of limits. Any of these things he could have done. And truthfully, 2 out of 3 of them, if he would have done them, we would have said, attaboy. We'd probably be celebrating it today. We would have been, man, right off the bat, he was even able to make rocks into bread and feed himself. Or he was able to even jump off, and God showed how much he loved him. Look at who this guy is. All these things we might have even admired him for, but he knew that was not what God had for him. And he accepted the limits and said, I'm not going to step out of what I'm supposed to do. And he didn't do it. He's a great example for us, but it's a reminder as we're talking about this that even Jesus accepted the gift of limits. And he's not the only ones. As you read through the pages of Scripture, many others did, and one of them that I like to bring up is Paul himself, the one we talked about last week, who talked about his brokenness and his weakness. On top of being willing to accept his brokenness and weakness was his willingness to accept limits in what he did. One of his famous passages, again, that we often hear about was when he's writing to the people in Corinth, and he's understanding his role in the ministry there, and he says that to them, he says, you know what? This is what's taken place. This is what's happened. And when it's all said and done, here's how it's worked. I planted the seed. Apollos watered it. And God made it grow. He didn't say, I did all of it. And I could do all of it. I could go out there. I just accepted my role and my spot and my part. And I trusted God to put whoever he had in that one and take care of whatever he needed to do there to do the rest. And now look what's come of this. He was accepting of the gift of limits in his life. Both of these guys demonstrated all through their life and all through their ministry. Jesus did not heal every person he came across from. They wanted him to start a great church in Capernaum. He didn't do that. He didn't choose everybody to follow him. When people actually were upset with his teaching because it was too hard, he didn't go chasing after him, needing everybody to love him. He accepted the limits. And when it was all said and done, he was able to tell the Father on the cross, I brought you glory on earth by completing the work you gave me to do. And if we're going to grow as emotionally healthy people, that's a gift that we can accept and should accept. So the question remains, as we close it up today, is how? Because maybe it leads to two. Maybe you go, you know what? I get it. I hear it. I understand that. I may not like it, but how do I know what my limits are? And how do I go about living in them? I mean, that's Jesus we're talking about. That's Paul. But this is me. How do I know when I'm getting ready to cross the limits of what God has for me? I think sometimes we make this a little bit too spiritual, if you want to say that. Even though I do believe that the number one way we know is ask him. We don't just pray and say, God, is this what you have for me? Do you want me to do this? The truth is, even in this simple situation of painting, what I really should have done, especially when some of these things were kicking in that I knew that this may not be a good idea, was said, God, do you want me to say no to this nice couple if I'm not supposed to? Or do you want me doing this? That's why it's called a relationship with him and not a religion, because we can talk to him about everything we do. So obviously the first thing we ought to be doing is praying and talking to him, but then there's some other markers. There's some other, like a light on a comes on and says you're about ready to exceed a limit on something. We have these things that kick in for us. There's a few check lights that we can look at when an opportunity is in front of us. The first is our own makeup and our own personality. That'll help us discern whether we're about ready to cross a limit. Who am I? What's my personality? What is the makeup of me? Do I get more energy from being with people as an extrovert, or do doing tasks on my own get me more excited? Am I more introverted? If we're constantly an introvert in an extrovert world, we're going to cross limits. Same the other way. If we're an extrovert that gets energy from people, we're just sitting in an office by ourselves all alone, that actually wears you out. Am I more spontaneous and creative, or am I more controlled and orderly? Am I more easygoing and relaxed, or am I naturally more tense and anxious around people? Is that how I'm wired? Am I a happy, positive, go-lucky type, or do I tend to more easily spiral into anger and annoyance and frustration and even depression? And I don't ask this in a negative way. I'm just saying, what's my personality? What's my makeup? How am I wired when things aren't going so well? I think of this a lot because this is a big one. It even took me this just in our marriage with Leanne and I. I can live off of less sleep. Helps when you have coffee. That was one of the other beautiful things of moving to Oregon. I learned to enjoy coffee. But I can do 4 or 5 hours of sleep and keep going. Leanne needs to go to bed. She needs some sleep. And to be honest with you, when it first started, I thought that was a problem until I realized that's not a problem. That's her makeup. She needs her rest. I can go. Now, do I need rest? Yes, I do. But I can go longer on that. And when you start talking to other couples, you realize that's not unique. We're just made differently in that way. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's all right. But these are the kind of things, what are my personality and what are my makeup? And then along with that, what are my talents and my gifts that I actually have? Or even right along with that, my interests. What kind of things actually interest me? What are my talents? For me personally, obviously, I grew up in a family with a dad who's an auto mechanic. I married into a family who runs an auto parts store and likes cars. You know what I felt like I need to do to live in that? Know how to fix every car and do everything and like it all. You know what I'm not good at? Fixing everything on a car and liking it all. It's not my talent. Not good or bad, it's not my talent. Now, I can change oil, I can do little things, but for a long time, I struggled with going, I've got to like this, I've got to be into this, I got to know how to do this. But it's not my talent. And when I would try and go outside of that, it would cause anxiety, it could cause frustration, it could show ignorance when I would try and share something, but I was crossing a limit. That's not who I am. And unfortunately, this is a hard one for us because we live in a YouTube it, DIY culture. Do it yourself, save some money, just YouTube it. Do you realize most of the people YouTubing it don't even know what they're doing, but they're putting it out there? I still think of Craig Rochelle in that one message when he was talking about even how to deal with COVID. I watched 3 YouTube videos and read 2 articles. Now I'm an expert. Wikipedia and YouTube are helpful, but they're not experts a lot of times. But this culture tends to push us beyond things we're actually good at. And one thing, I remember a friend telling me, and this was like a light bulb went off, especially when it comes to automobiles, when it comes to even some home repairs, things like that. I remember he just made a simple statement. He says, I figured out that when I hire out what others are good at, it opens it up for me to do what I'm good at doing. And then when it's all said and done, life goes better for everyone. And they're affected a lot better. There's a lot better result from that. By just accepting this is who I am and what I'm good at and what I'm not. I personally admire guys like N.T. Wright and his writings and his deep theological mind. Every once in a while, if you follow the Bible app, he'll pop up on those devotions, and you just see him sitting in his office with all these books, and he's like English or something, and he's talking with that accent, and just the way he even talks and shares and all the wisdom he has, I'm like, man, that dude is so cool. Wish could be like him. John Mark Comer, pastor at Bridgetown, just so smart. His writing is so good. I go, man, that dude is so intelligent. I admire guys like that. Matt Ingles, the guy that followed me at Newberg. Man, I was jealous of that kid. First of all, he was younger than me, and he was so much smarter in the way he would share and the way he'd communicate. And for so long, I would try and make myself like them. Like, I want to speak like them. I want to sound like them. I want to do that. That's actually one thing you were taught, was find someone that you appreciate and try and model yourself after that. You know what that often led to? Me walking off the stage going, "You're such an idiot. That was not smart. You had it in your head and you wrote it down, but when it came out of your mouth, it did not sound like John Mark Comer. He's so much cooler." And I would just have my stomach in knots going, I didn't do it. I didn't do it well, until I came to the realization, it's not my gift. That's not who I am. I'm me. I'm this. I had to receive the gift of those limits and realize I am not them. For those of you that ask me if I want to go hunt or fish or anything else to relax, don't, okay? It's not an interest. Do you want to go shoot baskets? I'm right there with you. We'll shoot hoops. Because it's not relaxing to me, I'm not against people that do it. That's great. But for me, I'm sitting there going, I need to get this done and this done and this done. And seriously, is anything ever going to bite? Is it ever going to happen? It's not my interest. And I just need to accept that at some point. Otherwise, it causes problems. So our talents, our gifts, our interests, and then finally our season of life is a good indicator of our limits. Life changes all the time. And the season we're in can dictate what we can do. When we're younger and we're full of energy, we may be able to do a lot, but the opportunities, they're just not there. When we're older and we're out of energy, well, we're just older and out of energy, so we can't do it. Why are you laughing at that, Bill? He's going, yeah, it's not the same. I know I can, but the season of life can change it. Paul even said the difference between being single and married can be a limit. Didn't make it good or bad, but it can be a limit. It's a season in life. When we're parents with little children versus parents of big children, right now, I don't have to do that, and it's awesome. I can tell Caden, drive to Ulta, please, and get me a drink, and that's awesome too. Things change, and how we respond and what we can do is a big part of that season in life. Ecclesiastes says there's a change. There's a new season all the time. There's something different coming. That is one of the lights. Now, let me say, this doesn't mean that sometimes God doesn't call us to something that is beyond our talent or beyond our interest or even we think beyond our season. Sometimes he does, and we know it, again, if we're praying, and it just keeps driving us, and we go, I need to do that, but I can't, but I need to do that, but I can't, because sometimes he goes beyond what we're capable of, and that's the supernatural thing that he can do. So we learn that, and then here's a few things, just say, how do we apply them to our lives? Number one, do the time and the work to better understand who God made when he made me. How many of you have stopped lately and sat down and said, God, who am I that you made? I recently became certified in Enneagram coaching because it's an ancient tool that's kind of come back out that people are starting to see, man, this really shows you a lot about who you are. It doesn't fix you. It's not the answer. It just helps you understand, why do I do that? Why am I doing that? And so in the process of that, one of the things I wanted to do is be coached myself. And I came across a woman that does this in the area, and she's coaching me. And the first time we were together, she's kind of rearranged some of this. And the way she did it, she goes, I look at, in the Enneagram, there's 9 different basic personalities that we possess one of those, that is a deep part of how we're hardwired. She goes, I like to look at them as 9 different reflections of God and the way that he created us to reflect God and bring color to this world and carry on the mission that he has for his church. And I love that. But we got to be willing to look at that and go, who did you make me to be? I'm not Bill. I'm not Alan. I'm not Tina. I'm me. So God, who did you make me to be? If we're going to live within our limits, we need to take the time to stop and look at that and then build boundaries around invasive people and projects. It's okay to build boundaries around that because they're always going to be out there. There are people that are going to want us to step outside their limits for their own selfish reasons all the time. Or they don't even know it's selfish. They just need help. There's some that's very evident in our lives. We get it, we see it, we go, you know what? We need to be able to build boundaries, and part of building boundaries is being willing to say no and be okay with it. Coming to the realization that it's okay to say no and not feel guilty about it. I recently asked someone if they'd be willing to help with children's church as we start back up. And you can tell that they felt at this time in their life that, no, this isn't what I need to be doing. And they were willing to say no, which was great. But you know what was heartbreaking, because I see this all the time, is you can tell they felt bad about that. You know why they felt bad about that? Because the church is notorious for making people feel guilty for saying no. And sometimes it's there because people just always say no, and you feel like they ought to do something. But other parts, it's because we think something needs to be done, and you're the one that needs to get it done because I don't want to do it, so we make them feel guilty for not. And it's sad that we've created a culture in the church with people who ought to understand who they are more than anybody, that they feel guilty for saying no. When the truth is, that might be the gift that God is presenting for them. So we build boundaries and we allow ourselves the freedom to say no. But with all this in mind, because we can fall into the trap of then just never doing anything and never getting involved. And I believe God does call us to be a part. He does call us to be involved. It's called being the church. It's not called one person. It's us all doing it with the talents and gifts and color He's given us. The thing to keep us from falling into the trap of doing nothing and to be what, her name was Millie Stupper. She's passed away now. But she goes, it drives me crazy when we have pew sitters in church, and I just say they are PU, was her way. They become PU Christians. That always sticks with me. And to stay away from falling into that trap, the last thing I think we need to do is find a team or a project or something of one or two where we can be involved with who we are, and then do it. If we're not involved with anything, we might need to start going, what am I doing here? Now I'm not even getting to my limits, because God has called us all to something. That's the whole purpose of the story behind the talents. So to keep us from getting to that place, we need to be involved with at least something. So all the others are saying no, but there's a time where we need to say yes. And the beauty of that is when we're all involved with that thing that we can do, if everybody were actually doing that, there would be less opportunities for people that shouldn't be doing it to do it. The right people would be in the right spots, and just imagine what the church would be in effectiveness if that were taking place. So get involved. If you want to come, we're going to close this morning. Get involved, but do it within your limits, because when you're within the limits, then it's a joy to be part of a team. And that includes even God's. When we're out of position and we're beyond our limits, it is miserable. And I'll share it this way. When I got out of high school, I had the fortune of getting to play, or let me take that back. I had the fortune of being on a college basketball team. I lie and exaggerate when I say I got to play on a college basketball team. But because I had the fortune of somebody coming to the best high school game I ever had in my life, so I was never able to repeat again, I actually got recruited to play for a college that no longer even exists now, Brown Mackie College. Worst 2 years of my life. Both the college situation, but also the basketball situation. The main reason being, I was recruited to go shoot the ball. That's what they saw me do that game, was be a shooter. But, and I know this doesn't sound great, I'm short. Don't look like the most talented guy. I don't, all that kind of stuff. In their mind, once I got there, they looked around at the rest of the team and they said, we need you to be a point guard. You know what I wasn't good at? You know who was the point guard of our high school team? My brother. You know why? Because he's better. That's where he was supposed to be. But when I got to the next level, they said, we want you to be a point guard. You want to know the most humiliating 2 years of my life playing basketball? Was trying to be in a position that I was not good at. I can tell you the very first time, the very first practice when I had to guard the starting point guard, to be honest with you, I don't even know what he did, but he was scoring before I turned around and knew what was going on. He was so quick. And then I got the ball and I took one dribble and he was going to the other end because he stole it from me before I even knew what was going on. I didn't know. I was so out of position. I was beyond my limit, even in the sport that I loved, out of position, doing something that I was not gifted at doing, and it was miserable. I never got back into that. They actually tried to, but the next year they brought in a guy that actually ended up going to the NBA. I remember I worked my tail off that summer because I had a 2-year college. I wanted to play that second year. I was determined. My heart sunk when I was told we recruited a guy named Eddie Robinson, 6'8", shoot it, jump. The guy literally jumped over me to dunk one time. That's how much better he was. And they said, guess what? He's going to be, because they were going to turn me back into a shooting guard. So I was excited. I worked on it. And then he showed up. I didn't play that year either. For a while, I was like, I'm just done with basketball. It kind of killed the joy. It killed the fun of it. I was done with it. But then I went to Warner. And after a year of just sitting and watching, it was really just a club team at the time play, but they were playing other college teams. They weren't an official team yet. Watching them, that passion kind of came back. I still had eligibility. I kind of wanted to play. I thought I can play on this team because they're not very good, so I can be on there. I can be out there. But I was kind of nervous about what position are they going to put me in? Where are they going to have me? And after getting to talk to them and talk to the coach and stuff, he asked questions about high school, college, all that. And he says, you know what? I'll let you go back to just be a shooting guard. Just go play that position again. I only did it 1 year because after that, I felt like another limit was coming and God was saying, this time of your life is done. It's time to move on to something else. But you know what? For 1 year, I was able to regain the passion of just playing a game again because I was back in position. I was back to what I could do and what I enjoyed. It's so important that we're within our limits because when we're not, we become frustrated and angry and annoyed and irritated and completely unloving to people around us. But when we're in position, we can show up, whether it's to practice or a game or whatever, with a smile on our face going, that's why I enjoy doing this. This is pretty cool. This is quite an opportunity. And God has a position for you. He just wants you to stay in that limit and experience the same thing. And in that, we become more emotionally healthy and able to love Him and others with all of who we are. So consider it this week. Are you beyond your limits? Have you exceeded the limits? Has a guy been so nice on the other end of the phone that you just can't say no? The only one you're not allowed to ever say no to is me. All right? I'm just seeing if you're all still paying attention right now. No. I'm going to ask, because that's my job. You need to determine, is this within my limits or not? And if we can get there to that sweet spot, the church, our lives, our health, so much better. And we're able to love so much more. Would you stand and let's close this morning?